Hey, good evening, students. I hope all of you are doing okay and getting ready for an Easter weekend well spent at home uh, in the midst of the COVID-19 epidemic, right? Um, I hope everybody's well, nobody's sick, and none of your relatives are sick. But you have an exam coming on the 17th. And let's talk a little bit about Jackson. Andrew Jackson, that would be, right? President Andrew Jackson, uh, former General Jackson, who, of course, gave a sound trouncing to the British at New Orleans. In addition to that, the man that was known as Old Hickory, and a lot of people say, well, why did they call him Old Hickory? It sounds kind of lame. Well, because he used to carry a piece of hickory and he used to beat people senseless with it, if not senseless to death. Okay. Former land speculator, former whiskey dealer. He was also accused of, he was an adulterer, I think a bigamist as well because of his wife. He married his wife. The story was that his wife had been married before this guy that was really not a nice guy. And he abandoned her. And then, this was Jackson's really, kind of like childhood sweetheart. And so he marries her. But the story is that he hadn't gotten divorced. She hadn't gotten divorced. And in the election of 1824, uh, when he runs against John Quincy Adams, that is a big issue. And in 1828, they still make a big issue out of it. And unfortunately, what happens is that I don't remember if her name was. I think her name was Rebecca. I'm not. I don't really remember. It was with an R, but I'm pretty sure it was Rebecca. And she goes to a dress shop in Washington, and she sees on a tabloid, adulteress, something to that effect, is going to live in the White House. Oh, the irony of it. I don't know. Um, and she falls ill. Everybody thinks that she had a previous heart problem or something, and she dies. And uh, Jackson never forgives the Adams corner for it. He is absolutely brutal with them. But anyway, of course, Jackson is known as he was a common man. He did not have any lineages to Senate, or, he wasn't wealthy. He really didn't know who his father was. He did, but he didn't. His brother had been killed in the War of 1812. He had been hit with the flat side of a sword when he refused to clean the boots of a British officer. He struck him. So he hated the British. He wasn't like these old Federalists that still had an attachment to Great Britain. I mean, he absolutely hated the British. And um, so he becomes president. He's actually the first president that gets elected for the Democratic Party. Martin Van Buren actually forms the Democratic Party. The little magician forms the Democratic Party and gets Jackson elected. Okay, in the inaugural, that's a fly there. Inaugural celebration. Uh, they have a big. I think it was like a 1 ton piece of cheese or 2 ton piece of cheese in the White House, and people are going in there and cutting pieces of cheese. Again, no pun intended. And they they destroy the White House. They like pillage it and stuff like that. It's really cool what you could do then. Okay, and so Jackson becomes president, and his presidency is it's really uh, seminal for the fact that It is the democratization of all white men. Okay? Not women, not brown people like me, and definitely not African Americans. Okay? But it's a democratization of all white men. Regardless of land, regardless of stature, regardless, everybody can vote. That is, every white male can vote. Now, with that said, you're going to have other men like Jackson that are going to get elected to Congress and Senate and so on and so forth. But Jackson's presidency is really defined by him as an individual who surrounds himself with people that think like him and do what he says, and he creates the spoil system, which is where he rewards those individuals that do what he says. And then he's also going to be defined by the nullification issue. Uh, it's going to be the Trail of Tears and the bank. Okay, now the problem with these things is that they're going to span from 28, it's going to be 28 and 32 and then 36, so it's going to span over a long time. Like, for example, in the Trail of the Tears, when you have the forced removal of, it's the Chickasaw, the Cherokee, the Sacs, uh, the Seminole. And the Seminoles don't all move. Remember, the Seminole is a tribe that is not conquered. They still live in their ancestral lands till today. And I'm forgetting another one, okay, but it's been a long day. I'm not going to ask you who the tribes are, but there is a treaty that was given to them. I believe it's a Treaty of Eshota, or Eshota. I don't know how to pronounce it. And what they do here is that uh, they are told that they're not ever going to be asked to leave. The problem is that settlers are moving into that area and they're clashing with the Indians. And Jackson says, well, if I don't move the Indians and the Indians kill settlers, then I'm going to have to go in there and take care of the Indians, and I don't want to have to do that. Now, let me make one thing clear. Jackson had no problem killing Indians, okay? It's really something macabre where he goes in and wipes out a village and he adopts one of the babies, and then later on in life he sends him a scalp and a couple of arrows or something like that. I remember reading that. So there is that. So when they actually move the Indians, it's Van Buren who's the president, and that's who gets blamed for it. Um, let's talk about the bank. Jackson hated the bank. He did not like the Hamiltonian idea of a strong currency. He believed that banks had too much power. In addition to that, I'm really, really singing low here, but I should. Let me see if I can adjust this so it can go a little more. Yeah, there we go. Don't you love the informality of these videos? It's just like class, isn't it? Except you can't see me take off my shoes like I do in class or something like that. I don't know. By the way, this one's going to be a little bit longer than 10 minutes. You look, see my job. Anyway, back to the lecture. So, he doesn't like Hamiltonian Federalism. He doesn't like the idea of banks because he believes that they're restrictive and that they control the economy too much, and they have to. That's the way it is. Now, what he wants to do is that he wants to have this agrarian society like Jefferson did. But the problem is that that's not going to work because, after you have what you need, then what good is it for me to barter corn with you if I've already got all the corn that I need? And there's only so long I can store the corn. You know what I mean? So what begins to happen is that we need, I would say, a fiat currency. We need, soft money. We don't need hard currency anymore. There's not enough gold in circulation to, push the country. And in addition to that, we have to create legal tender, a fiat. Like the car, crappy car, fiat. Okay, it's a Latin for, I forget what it means. I had a brain fart right here and I forgot, but it's pretty much a check. It's to pay to uh, the person that has this has one credit if it's $1, okay, and it's legal tender. I'm sorry, I talked myself into a tangle there. I do apologize, students. Now, what is going to happen is that these currencies are going to fluctuate, and Jackson doesn't want that. So when they go to what Clay, Calhoun, and Webster do, remember, Henry Clay, John C. Calhoun, and Daniel Webster, they get together and they said, before more Jackson people get elected to Congress and the Senate, let's go ahead and recharter the bill. Okay, the bank, and let's call it, the wonderful name, the Second Bank of the United States, right? And they recharter that, okay, and it's rechartered, and they go ahead and push it through the Senate, and Jackson vetoes it. Okay, ouch, that hurt because I cut my finger today. I was putting in a screw, and the screw went through, and it screwed into my finger there. Okay, so uh, they recharter, and Jackson vetoes it. And then, of course, they override his veto, and that you have to read about that. So I'm not going to tell you all about it, but eventually, uh, what he does is that he gets somebody that's going to listen to him, and which would be, if I'm not mistaken, students, um, the first Catholic Supreme Court Justice, Tunney, Justice Tunney. He's a horrible guy, honestly. Not because he was Catholic. He was just a he's the one that said, a black man has no right to have any rights over the white man. That kind of guy. You know what I mean? That's why I don't like him. Um, and what they begin to do is that they set up these pet banks where the federal government funnels money into these small banks to try and keep the economy going. Of course, Jackson leaves office, and then, of course, guess who inherits the problem? The little magician. Well, he has no magic to save the country from this, and they go into not a recession. This is actually a depression, and of course, it's going to ruin Van Buren's chances of getting elected again. Okay. And the other thing we need to talk about is nullification. And basically, what happens here is that there is a tariff that is so high that it's supposed to protect. It's a protective tariff, but the tariff is so high that it even hurts the North when it is supposed to really help the North. And Jackson knows that the tariff is wrong. And he tells John C. Calhoun, he said, hey, let me get in office and we'll take care of this tariff and we'll fix it. Of course, Calhoun doesn't listen to him and he nullifies the tariff. The problem is that here you have a state nullifying a federal act, and you cannot do that, okay, because the federal government is supreme. There's channels that we need to go through there. So what he says is that he says, when you send the guys to collect this tariff, South Carolina isn't going to pay it. Okay, I'm simplifying it. And he says, well, I'm going to pass a force bill that it's going to force you I'm going to send warships and I'm going to force you to pay the tax, whether you like it or not. And then Calhoun says, well, go ahead and do it and let's see what happens. It's of course, it's just exactly how the Civil War is going to come to be. Well, in the time that this back and forth issue is going on, uh, Clay, Calhoun, and Webster come to an agreement and they lower the tariff. Okay, so that means that Calhoun says, okay, we'll pay the what we have to pay. So theoretically, if that problem is fixed, then the force bill is gone, right? Well, we would think so. Well, after all is said and done, what does Calhoun do? He turns around and he nullifies the force bill that is actually null and void now because they have come to an agreement on the tariff. One of the things that Jackson said is that after he was president, he says, I regret not shooting Henry Clay and hanging John C. Calhoun. And that'll give you an idea of the relationship of these three men. I honestly believe that no man, I don't think that any man deserves to be president. You have to earn it. But I believe that Henry Clay had earned the right to be president. But because he crossed Andrew Jackson, he would never be president. And Martin Van Buren would have never been president had he not been tapped by Jackson because, of course, when Martin Van Buren forms the Democratic Party, he gets all these affluent, satisfied Federalists that are very wealthy to support Jackson, which otherwise they wouldn't have supported him, right? Because, I mean, come on, Jackson would walk around in his pajamas. From what I understand, he would relieve himself in the company of strangers, spit in the White House. I mean, you name it. I mean, he was your typical, country guy. Um, I do believe that he gave the presidency more power. He uh, was a brutal kind of guy, rough around the edges, but he's not one of my favorite presidents, okay? But that doesn't mean that he was a totally bad president. He wasn't one of my favorite presidents, but he still defined, it was a very, very important period in the history of the United States. And I don't know what it would have become without Jackson. And Jackson gave power to the presidency. And then later on, FDR comes, years later, 100 years later, almost 100 years, oh yeah, almost 100 years later, 100 years later, FDR comes and gives a lot of power to the presidency. I'm pretty sure I'm forgetting something in the middle. One of my colleagues is to say, well, you forgot this one and all that. And I said, well, anyway. So the other thing about Jackson is just his utter badassery kind of thing about him. I mean, utter coolness. He's dueling. After he's president, check this out. And he had been shot once, and he had a musket ball in his chest, and it kind of bothered him, and he had respiratory problems and all of the above. So he's going to give a speech, I believe, or something like that. Or maybe he was at a tavern. I don't quite remember very well. But a would-be assassin comes up to me. I think he's getting ready to get on a train or something. And the assassin pulls out a pistol, and pistol misfires. And he comes out and he pulls out a pistol, and pistol misfires again. And Jackson gets his cane and beats him almost to death. I mean, they have to pull Jackson off the guy. Then they test the pistols, right? And they both fired. I mean, they get him, cock the hammer back, boom. They cock the hammer from the other one, boom. So the only thing that we can determine from that I feel that we can honestly come to grips with, is that the pistols were themselves so incredibly afraid of Jackson that they on purposely didn't fire. Okay. And, Jackson's life is filled with these kind of stories. There's another incident where he was challenged in a duel. Nobody knows the reason why. I don't remember. I've never really researched that part, but it doesn't really matter. They challenged him to a duel. So, okay, let's duel out. And the dude that he was dueling with was like the best shot in the county. So what does Jackson do? Hey, I'll let you shoot first. So the guy shoots him. And that, from what I understand, is a bullet that he had lodged in his chest. I might be totally wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. I don't want somebody to say, well, you're all wrong. That's the one that got lodged in his armpit and not in his chest. Okay, that bullet hit him. So what does he do? He staggers back and he shakes it off like a bee sting. Well, the other dude wasn't so lucky. Jackson leveled on him and kapow, and the dude was gone. So that's Jackson for you. So you got to look at the larger than life Jackson, and then you have to look at, well, he is responsible for the death of, a couple of thousand, you know, Native Americans that were forced to move from Georgia and to Oklahoma. Because Oklahoma and Georgia are exactly the same. I mean, you can go from one place to the other and not even notice the difference in temperate climate or anything like that, right? So, we have to look at those things. When he butted heads with John C. Calhoun over nullification, I mean, that is right there showing that the federal government is supreme, and that no, just because you're a state and you think that the federal government is wrong, no, you can't go ask your mom if you can go out because I already told you couldn't go. And the deal with the bank, that is also shows the power of the president, because he continued to try and defeat the bank. He said the bank is trying to kill me, but I will kill it, something to that line. And he goes around and he fires individuals that will not do as he says until somebody that he picks will do what he says, and he rewards him with this, he is eventually going to become Supreme Court justice. So those are the kind of things that I'm talking about, and that's the beauty of Jackson. Now, the other thing that I want you to look at, because this video is already 20 minutes long, if I have a chance, you have to look on slavery and the beginning of the explosion of slavery with the invention of the cotton gin and slave life. Okay, I'm going to allow you to take the exam twice because you are face-to-face students that otherwise uh, did not sign up for that for a help me out here for an online class. And in addition to that, let's keep in touch. I haven't heard from any of you, so keep at it. You all be careful. Uh, Make sure you wear your little masks like that. You make sure you brush your teeth because then, ugh, right? Okay. And be kind to each other. And if you're stuck at home with your significant other or your siblings or your parents, don't even start it. Okay, just relax, eat, eat some more, read, study, eat, sleep, eat, study. That kind of deal. Make sure you filed your unemployment. Be patient, and we're all gonna get out of this alive. Yeah, trust me, we are. Okay, and keep in touch. For those of you that celebrate Easter, have a great Easter. Okay, uh, don't go to church. Okay, and if you go to virtual church or anything like that, then celebrate as you would and be safe and be kind to each other. And as I said in other videos, I really miss all of you. I do. I didn't get choked up about it, but if I think about it long enough, I will. Um, I miss being in the classroom, and the fact that I don't know when I'm going to go back because of this pandemic, it's discomforting, and it's okay to be scared because we're not scared of the virus. We're scared of uncertainty, okay? And Americans hate uncertainty. US Americans, we hate uncertainty. We don't like to know what we don't not like to know what tomorrow holds, okay? So I understand that. It's okay to be scared, okay? Um, but you all take care. Uh, And like I've told you many times, be kind to each other.